everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I decided to sneak in a video that will wrap up my 2022 year. This will be the official last video of this year, so you won't see me again until probably the first Saturday in January. I'm going to take a little bit of time off, spend time with the husband and the family for the Christmas and New Year's holidays. But I wanted to kind of pop on here and talk to you about all the books that I read in 2022. Now, I cannot give you a synopsis or a quick review on why I rated the books the way that I did, because if I did, this video would be like a 2 or 3 hour movie. And I'm pretty sure that no one wants to sit here and listen to me talk about all of these books and, all of that stuff for 2 or 3 hours. So I'm going to quickly run through some of the stats that I have printed off here of all of the star ratings I did for 2022, all of the genres that I read, because I kind of like to see what my average star rating was for the year, and also like how many books did I read in specific genres, because each year it's different. One year I may have a lot of just straight romance books, where other years I have a lot of fantasy. Now, this year I can tell you that fantasy was the dominating genre this year. I don't know if it's just because I was in the mood for more fantasies. I don't know if there were just newer fantasies being thrown at me or what, but definitely took the top of the list. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'll go over how many star ratings I did, what my average star rating was, and then also kind of all of the different genres, like how many books I read in those genres. Now, I did, make some like sub-genres on here that maybe you might not, but I like to highlight kind of the key elements or the core genres that I am reading, so that I know year to year what I've gravitated towards. And then whenever I get to reading the books, I am going to go from my DNF rating, and then all of my 1 stars, all of my 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars. Then I'm going to end with a list of all of my 5 stars. Now, the thing that I do want to let you know about is there are a few series in here that I read where one book I may have rated 4 stars, and then another book I rated 2 stars. So if you see book 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. In different categories, that's because in that point in that series, that is the rating I gave it. And, just to kind of go over with you, of course, we know what a DNF is. A 1 star is a book that I finished, but I should have DNF'd because I was not having a good time. My 2 star ratings are books that really didn't have a good time, but there may have been 1 or 2 elements that kind of kept me reading. A 3 star is just an okay book. I enjoyed my time while I was there, while I was reading it and being in the world, but it's not something that I am overly ecstatic about, or that, I'm going to be, just raving about for years. It was just a good time. A 4 star is where I had an extremely good time. I was intrigued. I was hooked. I loved the plot, the characters, everything. But there may have been a few things in that book that made me not enjoy it, as much as I would have. For instance, maybe there was slow pacing, maybe there was poor character development, different things like that. And then, of course, a 5 star is an outstanding read. I don't feel like that this book could have been any better, no matter how much editing happened or what the, author had done. If you do want a breakdown of any of these books on my reviews, you can click the link in my description below to my Goodreads page, and there you can see the books that I've read, read the reviews, if you want a more in-depth of why I rated it the way that I did. Now, Without further ado, let's just kind of get into it. But first, I just want to let you know, please like this video and please subscribe, because I would love, for you to continue this book reading journey with me in 2023 and stick around to see what I have planned, the books that I'm wanting to read, and also, head over to my Instagram. All the links are in the description below. You can comment on this video and let me know what books you think I should read in 2023. Head over to my Instagram. You can follow me there. You can message me. Let me know what books you are reading or what books you would want me to read, or maybe we could buddy read something. Just, hit me up. Let's talk about books and everything. So with all of that done and over with, let's get into my 2022 stats. So in 2022, I had 4 DNFs. I had 8 1-star ratings. I had 13 2-star ratings. I had 23 3 stars and also 23 4 stars, and then 27 5-star ratings, which is a total of 98 books that I read in 2022, which is, I don't even know how I did that. My average star rating was a 3.37. So not terrible. It seems like I, a little more than enjoyed myself throughout the whole year as a whole on reading. So I think that's not terrible. Definitely not as low as I was thinking it was going to be whenever I was thinking back on the books that I had read. So I was pretty astounded by that. Now let's go down into the genres. I had 3 dark romances. I had 1 dark romantic fantasy, 7 just straight fantasy books, 1 fantasy fiction, and 1 fantasy horror. I had 4 fantasy paranormal romances where they mashed the genres together. I had 46 fantasy romances. I had 1 historical fantasy, 1 historical fiction, 1 horror, which really surprised me, 1 nonfiction, 1 paranormal, 9 paranormal romances, 1 paranormal urban fantasy, 3 straight romances, 1 sci-fi fantasy, 2 sci-fi fantasy romances. I had 2 sci-fi romances and 2 time travel fantasy romances. I read 1 YA, 1 YA fantasy horror, 3 YA fantasy romances, 2 YA paranormal romance, 1 YA paranormal urban fantasy, 1 YA sci-fi dystopian, and 1 thriller. Thriller has never been on my list, so that was pretty interesting. But I have noticed over the years that there's less and less YA books on my entire list for that year. And I don't know if that's just because I'm gravitating more towards new adult and adult books, or if, the YA genre maybe doesn't have a whole lot of books that I gravitate towards. But I thought that was pretty interesting. So now here we go into the books. While I'm talking about them, I will briefly put a picture of the book here. It may not even be, because whenever I was taking the clippings of these books off the internet, there are some that are not the actual covers that I own or that I read. So it looks like there were quite a few authors out there that were changing their covers towards the end of the year or in the middle of the year just after I had read it. So the first one, and like I said, they're not in any order in this order. It's just however I made my sheet. So I wouldn't say this is the worst book of all time, but these are my DNFs that I read in the year. Okay, so I hope I edited that well. My camera just shut off in the middle of this, but let's start over. The first book would be Cursed Vampire by Brogan Thomas. This was a DNF. It is a paranormal romance. I don't know what I was thinking when I started this book. The next one is Legacy by Jessica Sundin. Of course, another DNF. This is the sci-fi fantasy romance. There is an untraditional fairy tale by Corey Zahara. This again was another DNF, and it's a dark romance. It's extremely dark. So anything on this list, make sure you're checking trigger warnings, because There are some in here that get quite dark, and I'm not going to tell you every one of them that has it. So if you like any of these covers and, you know, some of these intrigue you, check trigger warnings. The next one, the last one in the DNF category is Lucifer's Fate, which is book 3 in the series by Skye Wilson. This one was a paranormal romance. I think I read books 1 and 2 in 2021, and I actually liked them. I think the first one I had rated like a high 4-star. I think the second one I rated like a 3-star. Like, it was okay. But then you get to book 3 and it was just terrible. So I just stopped reading the series altogether. Now, the next set is the 1-star category. So of course, you know, I should have quit reading these, but I didn't because I'm a glutton for punishment. So the first one up in this category is The Forsaken King by Penelope Barsetti. 1 star. It's a fantasy romance. I did make a video about this back in September, so you can always, you know, go back and watch that if you'd like. The War of Two Queens by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I gave it 1 star. Another fantasy romance. If you watched one of my recent videos where I reorganized my shelves and I was getting rid of some books off of there, I just got rid of everything Jennifer L. Armentrout. I have realized that she is just not an author for me. The series did start off at a pretty high rating, but by the time we get to the War of Two Queens, I was out. I was like, I'm done. This is enough. I should have quit reading, but I read all 700 or 800 pages of misery. And that's just how I feel. Kiss of the Rose by Kate Pierce, another 1 star. I should have quit reading this book. It had the Tudor Vampire Chronicles in like the top right corner, and I'm a big Tudor fan. So I was like, I'm all in. It's a fantasy romance, and it was absolutely terrible. Just don't even try. And then there is Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. This one is a sci-fi romance. I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to watch this video and be like, why did you give it a 1 star? Why did you not like it? Just wasn't for me. I just was not vibing with it at all. I don't think that it's a terrible book, but I think that you have to like that genre. I think you really have to like the alien smut to really like this series, and I just was not into that. The next 2 are in a series, and it's A Rune of Roses by K.F. Breen, which is a spicy fantasy romance. Then you have A Throne of Ruin by K.F. Breen as well, which is also, again, another spicy fantasy romance. Breaking Time by Sasha Alsberg. This was a 1 star. It's a time travel fantasy romance. Listen, I was told this has Outlander vibes. Read it. And so I'm a huge Outlander fan. And whenever I read this book, it just did not live up to those vibes that I was wanting. It was a waste of my time, and I was not happy. And then the last one in this genre, or in this category, is Weapon of Fire and Ash Complete Omnibus by Brittany Matson. Now, I know this is showing only the first book, but I read the whole 5-book series. I didn't realize that's what an omnibus was until I read it, and this is a YA paranormal urban fantasy, and I did not have a good time. So it was a 1 star. I don't even know why I kept reading. It was just one of those books, right? Okay, so next are the 2-star ratings, where it wasn't terrible. It's not trash, but it's definitely not the best time I've had. So the first one up is The Diviners by Libba Bray. This one was a fantasy fiction. I just could not get into that book. Forbidden Obsession by J.A. Owenby. This is a dark romance. Very dark. This was one of them in my most recent videos that I read 20 Kindle Unlimited books. So if you want more of the breakdown and the review of some of these books, definitely check out some of my past videos, because a lot of these I did put on there. The next one is The Awakening by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. That's a fantasy romance, and it's the first book, I believe, in the Zodiac Academy. And of course, it is terrible. I think the majority of people think the first book is terrible, which I would wholeheartedly agree. The next one is A Veil of Truth and Trickery by Anna Lee Ford, which is a fantasy romance. That one was a letdown because I had high hopes. The next one is Magic of the Demon Fae by Ava Mason, which is another fantasy romance. The next one is Bound to the Dark Elf King by Jessica Grayson, which is a fantasy romance. A lot of these 2 stars and 3 stars were on that 20 Kindle Unlimited books, and this was one of them. And so if you like the Married to Magic series, you definitely will like that book. Then there was Untainted by Lillian T. James, which is a spicy fantasy romance, and it did not hit for me. I know there are a lot of people out there that absolutely love Untainted. I am not one of them. I just feel like it was literally nothing but sex and smut and all of that. And there was no plot. There was no development. And so that was just my take on everything. The next one was a buddy read that I had, which was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is a historical fiction. This one was another letdown because I was so excited to go into reading this book, and no. The next one is Salem's Lot by Stephen King, which is the one horror book that I read this year. I decided to give Stephen King a try. I had Salem's Lot already, and it was not a good time for me. I wasn't scared at all, but I really did not vibe with Stephen King's writing, in that I have read 11/22/63 by Stephen King, loved it, devoured the book. I've read it actually a couple times, but as far as his horror goes, I just could not really feel the vibe and get into it. The next one is Magic Trials by Meg Zumi, which is a paranormal romance. And then The City Beneath the Hidden Stars by Sonia Kudai, which is a paranormal urban fantasy. It is a book I got off of NetGalley as an ARC, and just something about mythology and folklore and, you know, like these urban legend type of things. And it didn't hit for me. Eclipse the Moon by Jessie Gage, which is a time travel fantasy. No, it's not. It's a sci-fi romance. Don't listen to me. Eclipse the Moon was another ARC that I was given, and by NetGalley, and the cover was beautiful, and I just wanted to try, you know, to read it, and it didn't work. So that's Eclipse the Moon by Jessie Mihalik. I apologize for that. The next one is Wishing for a Highlander by Jessie Gage, which is the time travel fantasy romance, and the last one in our 2-star category. Now, Wishing for a Highlander is actually a funny story because I saw this, I think, on Kindle Unlimited, and I was like, ooh, I want to read this because the synopsis sounds good. So I'm reading the book, and I am not even halfway through. I'm maybe a quarter of the way, and I'm like, wow, this book really sounds like something that I have read before. And I pull up Goodreads, and I've already reviewed it. I don't even remember reading it, but I give like this detail of a review. So I was like, I don't know how I did that. So I went ahead and read it, and I wish I wouldn't have. It was a 2-star. I think I had rated it a 3-star originally. I dropped it down to a 2. I was like, listen, I've read this twice now. If I did not remember it the first time, then it is not 3-star worthy. That's just all I'm saying. Okay, so now here we go with the 3-star ratings. Now, there are going to be some of these on here that are going to be your absolute favorites. They're going to be ones that you're like, I rated that 5 stars. How did you not like it? Listen, we all like different things in books. Please remember that. So some things you like, I may not like, and vice versa. So, please do not shred me in the comments. Please. Thank you. The first one up in the 3-star is a very heavy hitter, and it is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. It is a 3-star rating. It's a fantasy romance. Listen, I was up and down with this series, okay? Started out okay, got really good, and then just tanked for me. So that's just how I was with it. Same way with Zodiac Academy. You're going to realize I'm all over the board with that one. The next one up is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, which is just a romance. And then Fortuna Sworn by KJ Sutton, which I gave 3 stars. It was like a fantasy horror. I want to give this series a try. I haven't read past the first book. I got an arc on NetGalley as an audio arc, an audible. It's not really audible, but it's like an audiobook arc of it. And I don't know if it was the narrator. I don't know what it was, but it just wasn't hitting for me. It was okay. Maybe I need to read the second book physically and see if I like this, because I know this is a very loved series by some people. The next one is Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which is another 3-star with a fantasy romance. The next one is one of my most recent reads, and it's A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This is the prequel to Priory of the Orange Tree. So this one I gave 3 stars. It's just a fantasy. It does have some romance in it, and it is sapphic. So if you like that, definitely pick it up. Be prepared for an almost 1,000-page book, though. It's big. The next one is The Broken and Sinned by G. Bailey, which is a paranormal romance. The next one is Kiss the Fae by Natalia Jaster, which is another fantasy romance. I actually really enjoyed Kiss the Fae. There were just some elements in the book that did not allow me to make it a 4-star, because I wanted to so bad. And then the next one is Curse of Shadows by A.K. Wilder. This is a YA fantasy romance. I actually got this one as a arc straight from the publisher, which was Entangled Publishing. So I was really excited for that. The next one is called Ashes by M.K. Harkins. It's 3 stars. This is a fantasy romance. It's a retelling of like Cinderella. So I was kind of intrigued. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. So I don't think that I'm going to read any more by the author. The next 3 are going to be Ruthless Fae, The Reckoning, and Heartless Sky by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. All 3 stars. They're fantasy romance. They're in the Zodiac Academy series. These 3 were just okay for me. There were others in the series that were a lot better in my thoughts. The next one is A Secret in Onyx by Jessica Florence. That one is a fantasy romance as well. Fate Calling by Lindsay Grace, which is another fantasy romance. You have Prince of the Dark Fae by Lindsay Devon. That's another fantasy romance. Like I said in my stats, fantasy and fantasy romance really won out this year. I was just devouring every fantasy I could get, it seemed. The next one is Starry Messenger by Neil deGrasse Tyson. If you watched my October wrap up, I read this book in October. I got an arc from the publisher, and I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. I love the galaxy and the stars. I thought my camera stopped again. And then as I read this book, I realized that it didn't have anything to do hardly with what I was wanting out of the book. It was okay. I had an okay time. There were a lot of parts that I absolutely hated. I shredded the book in my wrap-up. So if you're ever looking for a nonfiction that you think is going to be about outer space, this is not the book for you. The next one is Liar by Nicola Lowe, which is a paranormal romance. Interesting story. The author reached out to me on Instagram a few months ago and just randomly said, hey, do you want to read my book? It's this, and here's a synopsis. And so I was like, this sounds pretty good. You don't really have any ratings or really a following, but I'll give it a try, right? So I get the book. I really loved this book. There were a lot of like plot holes and character development and stuff that really needed to be fleshed out. But the overall story and the characters, oh my goodness, I messaged her immediately and was like, are you coming out with a second book? I need more. I need more of these characters. So if you want to give it a try, just know going in, it is an indie author. I don't know if it's, her very first book she's ever published. So it's not squeaky clean and perfect, but it's actually pretty darn good. So I would highly recommend that book. The next one is Kiss of Darkness by Taylor Aston White, and it's a paranormal romance. The next one is Imperfect by Dee Larson, and that one is a romance. I read the first book in this series, which is called Perfect, in 2021, I believe. And I think I got it off of Book Sirens, I believe. I don't remember. I think it was Book Sirens. And I loved it. And then I got Imperfect, and it wasn't nearly as great, but it was still pretty good. So if you're looking for kind of like a romance that has like a little bit of a mystery element into it, you might really like that book. Then there's Spellbound by Crystal Johnson, which is another romance. The book cover is beautiful. That's what drew me in. The next one is Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by Shay Earnshaw. This one is just a YA book. It's a continuation from A Nightmare Before Christmas, and it was okay. You can read you can watch my October wrap up if you want to hear me kind of demolish this book in a way, but also still love it. So it was kind of weird. The next two are Forbidden by Siri James and Ryan James, and then also Embolden by Siri James and Ryan James. Both of them are YA paranormal romances. Started reading the first book in September whenever my husband picked out my 2 books for the week to read. Loved Forbidden. Of course, it wasn't a 4-star read, but it was enough for me to want to read the second book. I got Embolden. I had an okay time. Had a lot of problems with plot development and kind of wrapping up certain plot elements, and I feel like there should be a third book, but I don't think they have any intention of coming out with a third book. So I'm kind of torn on whether I love or hate this series. So those are those. The next one is Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova. This one is a fantasy romance. They are all standalones in that series, so if you like any of them, you can just read them all whenever you want. The next one is The Crown of Gilded Bones. Oh, wait. We're in the 4-star category. Hold on. The first one in the 4-star category was Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova. So the next one is The Crown of Gilded Bones. Like I told you, From Blood and Ash was a roller coaster. Like, I started, got good, and then it tanked. So Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout. It's a fantasy romance. The next 4-star is Dirty Lying Fairies by Sabrina Blackberry, and it's a fantasy romance. I believe this book started out on Wattpad, I believe, and they made it into a book. And I didn't read it on Wattpad. I didn't even know what Wattpad was until I got this book and then kind of learned how it came about. Anyway, Dirty Lying Fairies, loved this book. Of course, there's a few things wrong with it, but I plan on reading more. I loved it. The next one was Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell. This was my one and only thriller that I think I've ever read in my entire life. It was really good. I buddy read it with my friend Linda, and she did great. I'm so happy she showed me this book. The next one is Crown of Bones by A.K. Wilder, which is a YA fantasy romance. This was another one that I got from the publisher as a read to read the second book. And so I got both of them and I got to read both of them, so I didn't have to wait. And I was pretty happy for that. The next one is a highly recommended book, and it is Her Dark Reflection by Haley Jade, which is a dark romantic fantasy. This book, for one, drew me in because of the cover and the synopsis, and it was absolutely amazing. Highly recommend if you like dark romantic fantasies. The next one is The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is just fantasy. Listen, I have never read Lord of the Rings until that week that my husband picked out the 2 books, and he picked out Forbidden and The Fellowship of the Ring, and I read both of them, and I had a great time. I had no idea that my husband could do so good, but he did amazing. The next one is Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong, which is a fantasy paranormal romance. I absolutely loved this book. It is not a continuation from her original duology of These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends, but it is set in the same world, and it's set like 5 years after the ending of Our Violent Ends, and it does follow one of the characters from that original duology. So if you liked those, definitely read this book. It was really, really, really good, and I got an ARC for it, and I actually, if you go back to my September videos, I did come out with my Foul Lady Fortune review video. So if you want to go check that out, that's one of the videos that a lot of people have clicked on. So if you want to go read that or listen to my review on that, you can. The next one is The Royal Rod Anthology, which is by multiple authors, but one of them is Nicole Wells. And if any of you know, Nicole Wells is one of my absolute favorite authors. She's an indie author, but this series has a bunch of books by different indie authors, and there's fantasy, paranormal, romance, type stories, and extremely spicy. So if you like erotica, pick up this anthology because it was good. The next one, or the next 2, are in the same series. The Fae King's Dream by Jamie Schlosser, which is book 2 in the series, and then The Fae King's Prize by Jamie Schlosser, which is book 3 in the series. And both of them, or all of them, are fantasy romances. They're absolutely amazing. I loved them so much. The Fae King's Curse is the first book in the series, and I really liked what she did because the main male character is blind. So I thought that was an amazing take on everything. The next one is House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas, which I'm a huge fan of. 4 stars. I didn't fully enjoy my time, but I did enjoy my time enough that I cannot wait for book 3, especially the way that this one ended, because if you've read it, you know how it ends. And that was a fantasy romance. These Twisted Bonds by Lexi Ryan, which is another fantasy romance, which gives me a lot of ACOTAR vibes. So if you like A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, you will love These Twisted Bonds. And then, is These Twisted Bonds the second one? Yeah, These Twisted Bonds is the second one in the series. These Hollow Vows, which is on the list, is the first book, but you would love that duology. It's so good. So good. The next one is Shadow Princess by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti, which is a fantasy romance. It is part of the Zodiac Academy series, which, as you can tell, I have the same thing that I did with From Blood and Ash, where it's kind of a roller coaster, and they're just all over the place for me. The next one is The Dark King by Gina Maxwell, which is another fantasy romance. This book is so good, you guys. Dark and delicious. The next 2 are again from Zodiac Academy, Cursed Fates, and then Fated Throne, both by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti, and both of them are fantasy romances. The next one is The Inadequate Heir by Daniel L. Jensen. This one is the 3rd book in the Bridge Kingdom series, but it is not a continuation of the original duology. It does take place in a different part of the world and with different characters, but you do kind of need to know what happens in the original duology, which is the Bridge Kingdom and the Traitor Queen, to kind of understand what's going on in this book, even though it can be read as a standalone. So I do highly recommend, don't start with The Inadequate Heir, go back to the Bridge Kingdom and read that duology before you read this, so you can understand the world and why things are the way they are. But it is a fantasy romance. The next one is An Enchantment of Thorns by Helena Rookwood, which is a fantasy romance. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It was so good. Another one of those that I read on my 20 Kindle Unlimited books. And then you have Kingdom of the Feared, which I actually just finished up by Carrie Maniscalco. And that is a fantasy romance. And I did rate it 4 stars because I love the world and I love Wrath and I love Amelia and I love all of the characters. However, I'm so disappointed in the book as well because I feel like this book is the smallest of the 3 and I don't feel like she took the time to flesh out the story and expand on the world and expand on the plot of what's already, you know, kind of going on. And instead, she just, you know, kind of threw it all together. Like, this is how everything's wrapped up. And it just happened so quick and I'm not happy about it. The next one is Beneath the Starlit Sea by Nicole B., which is a historical fantasy. The next one is Elsewhere by Alexis Shaitkin. Anyway, it's a sci-fi fantasy. It's actually really good. You should go check it out because I think it is on Amazon as one of the top in the sci-fi fantasy genre, so definitely go check it out. And then the last one for our 4-star is The Stars Between Us by Kristen Terrell, which is a YA sci-fi dystopian. I'm getting tongue-tied. Thankfully, we're getting to the end of this video. Now here comes all of my 5 stars. There are going to be a lot of repeat authors on here and a lot of fantasy, so brace yourself. So first up, let me make sure these are all of his books. It is. So the first 5 in our 5-star category all come from the same author, which is C.T. Ortega, and there is Asgard and the Hunt, which is book 2 or 3 in the Rider and the Throne series. And then you have One Will Die, which is a standalone. Assassin's Odyssey, which is also a standalone. You have The Rider and the Throne, which is book 1 in his series. And then you have Jewels of Egypt, which is a standalone. And all 5 of those are all fantasy books. They all deal with like Egyptian, Norse, and Greek gods, and just different variations of mythology and things like that. So if you like any of that, check out some of his work. It's really, really good. The next 2 are by Rebecca L. Garcia. You know I love her. I love her. And anyway, it's the first 2 books in her series, Shadow Kissed and Midnight Crown, the current series that she is reading. Both of them are fantasy, paranormal romances, very spicy, very dark. Love them. Who can't love these covers? They're amazing. The next one is These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan, which is book 1 in that duology, which is a fantasy romance. You have The Fae Warrior's Princess, which is book 4 in that series by Jamie Schlosser that I was telling you about. It's a fantasy romance. You have Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco, which is another fantasy romance. That's book 1 in the series. You have Pleasing the Prince and Charming the Enchanter by Freya Cole. Both of them were 5 stars. They are reverse harem. They are very spicy, but they are fantasy romances. Then the next 3 are in a series by Olivia Wildenstein, and I found this author this year and I love these books and I just cannot wait to read more by her. I just got from the Arcane Society her Angels of Elysium series, I believe, and they're gorgeous and beautiful, and I can't read those. I gotta read the ones on Kindle because I don't want to mess those up. But these 3 are ones that I really, really hope will get a special edition. The first book is Rose Petal Graves, and then you have Rowanwood Legends and Rising Silver Mist. I don't know if those last two are in the exact order, but all three of them are part of the same series. 5 stars for all of them. They're fantasy romances, and they were just superb. Absolutely amazing. The next one is Curse of Shadows and Thorns by L.J. Andrews, which is another fantasy romance. You have A Forest of Stars by Lindsay Hall, which is a fantasy romance. And then you have Broken Bonds by Jay Bree, which is a very spicy fantasy romance. And then The Book of Azrael by Amber Nicole, which is just a paranormal book. It was actually pretty good. I don't even remember where I found this book. I'm going to be honest. I don't know where I found it, but I loved it. The Into the Mist by PC Cast, which is a paranormal romance. It's about witches and stuff. PC Cast is one of my automatic pickup authors. I absolutely love her House of Night series that she wrote with her daughter, Kristen Cast, which starts out as Marked, I believe. And so good. So whenever she came out with Into the Mist series, I had to start reading it and absolutely loved it. The next one was Immortal Rising by Lindsay Sands, which was a 5-star read for me. Had no idea that this book was like 30 or 40 books long, this series. So didn't read anymore. Don't really feel like going back to read book 1. I think that was a standalone, so I think I'm okay. The next one is Daughter of Summer by Victoria Williams, which is a paranormal romance. This one came out of the woodwork. I don't even know. I added it to my Kindle Unlimited one day. The review is part of that 20 Kindle Unlimited books that I read, and it came out of nowhere. Loved every minute of it. We'll be reading more on that. The next one is The Lost and the Chosen by Ivy Asher, which is a sci-fi fantasy romance. Then you have Kingdom of the Cursed, which is book 2 by Carrie Maniscalco in that series, which is another spicy fantasy romance. You have Shades of Rust and Ruin by A.G. Howard, which is a YA fantasy horror. I got sent this book by the publisher. Didn't even request it, and it just came, and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like it. You know, there's not really romance in it, and it's about horror and stuff. I'm so happy I read it. Clearly, the publisher knows me better than I know myself. The Court of Secrets by Rebecca L. Garcia, which is, I believe, book 3 in her YA fantasy romance series. And then finally, the last book in the 5-star category is Under by Helen Hart, which is a dark romance. It is from Braden Black's point of view, from her Follow Me Darkly series, which I think is really neat how Helen did this. She came out with Follow Me Darkly, and then Follow Me Under, and then Follow Me Always, which follows Sky and Braden's story, and it's very 50 Shades of Grey, but like on a whole different level. It is so good. The plot is amazing. The characters actually are developed, and the plot is very well developed, and I thought that it was extremely good. But then Helen Hart came out with the books from Braden's point of view, and the first one is called Darkly. The second one is called Under, and I'm going to assume that she's going to come out with Always, which is the third and final book from Braden's point of view. So can't wait for that. Absolutely love that series. But that is all 98 books that I read in 2022. This video is going to be so long. I hope that you stuck around for this whole thing, because I hope that maybe you found some books that you may want to read, and hopefully that makes your next year, to TBR that much better. I don't know. Maybe you read some of these and you disagree with my ratings. Definitely let me know below. Do you disagree with some of my ratings? Do you agree with them? Are there some on there that I rated lower than what you rated, or did I rate them higher than you rated? Because I really like to know. Just because we have differing opinions or different reading styles and things that we like, doesn't mean we can't talk about what we liked and what we didn't like, because I may have loved Rose Petal Graves by Olivia Wildenstein, and you may have hated it for any reason, and that is okay for that. But I love debating books, and I love talking about plots and characters and different things, and like, where do you think the author's going to go with them, or why do you think they did that? So like I said, leave me some comments below. Definitely check me out on Instagram. Come talk with me. And then also, any of these books, you can go to my Goodreads. You can find the full review there. Some of them you can tell that I lazily did it because I only put just a little bit on there. And then other ones, I had a very heated discussion of my own self in the review section. So, you know, definitely go check those out on my Goodreads page. But I hope everyone's 2022 has been amazing. I hope you have read a lot of books that you want to read, that you wanted to read. And I hope that you are enjoying so much time with your family for Christmas and New Year's. And I can't wait to see you all in the new year with a whole new TBR and a whole new set of plans and all these amazing books that are going to come out. So stick around, have a Merry Christmas or a Happy Hanukkah or whatever holiday you celebrate, but I hope that you celebrate it with people you love. So until next time, everyone, and see you in 2023. Bye.